Hello, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time once again. Let's talk metal. So, I'm at a weird place in terms of making videos because I tend to make videos in batches where I might make, five in a week and posting one a week that gets me through like a month. So, currently, the bin is all but empty, so it's time to start recording some new ones. But I don't really have the time to do a major batch of recordings. Something else I've been thinking about is that currently I'm trying to focus more on going back and listening to things that I haven't played in a while. Some things I got recently that just didn't get enough spins. Others have been sitting around for a while, just collecting dust. I want to spend more time digging into those. Been trying to make it a point not to buy as much stuff lately. I have only one CD in the mail currently, and it's an album I'm very familiar with. I've just never owned a copy, and I found it for a good price. So yeah, not gonna be, as many like new discoveries maybe to talk about. Want to spend more time talking about the old stuff and rediscovering it. So I'm thinking videos for a while might be more focused around what my playlists are rather than just picking different, topics or, whatever's come in the mail lately. And there's a band I've been checking out that we're going to talk about. You've already seen it on the thumbnail. You know where this is going. Something to touch on before we get into the main topic, though. Some folks may have noticed that one of my other recent videos that was unboxing the last few packages that came in with a lot of cool death metal stuff from places like Chile. Um, there was an issue with the thumbnail. My thumbnails, I used the kind of same template for all of them. Built the video, posted video, didn't have time to check on the video the day it released. When I checked on it that evening, there was no thumbnail. Like, that's really weird. Did I somehow manage to post the video and forget to put the thumbnail on it? 98% certain that didn't happen, but I guess it's possible. So went into YouTube, quickly re-edited the thumbnail, went about my business. Checked it again the next morning. Thumbnail's gone. But this time, the second time, there's a message from YouTube. Oh, your thumbnail violates our policy on like nudity and sexual imagery. Like, they're death metal CDs. What are we talking about here? There had been no message the first time the thumbnail disappeared, but now it seems they took it off immediately, but never said they did so or why. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell was on the thumbnail that would have been graphic? There was a Ravenous Death CD. It's just like some kind of hell creature. There's nothing sexy about that. Um, There's the Mortify cover as part of it. That's a skeleton reaching up to the heavens. I don't think that's a turn on for anybody. There's also a Mephitis CD. Is there something buried in the background? Well, it turns out, yes, there is. The album is Ember Dawn with Mephitis. And if you look down here, yes, one of these little gray clay-like people, this is not winning any art awards, let's be honest here. One of them has one boobie showing. And apparently that is what, yes, set off YouTube and they had to pull the thumbnail. So it's like, okay, whatever. I put a little gray square over this one little spot and the thumbnail's absolutely fine. So, um, it's not a huge thing. There's no copyright strike. The channel's not banned. It's sort of annoying. And it does say something about society in general when videos can depict tons of violence, gore, all the foul language you want, but you show one badly drawn ash gray cartoon, girl nipple, and oh no, we can't have that. It's weird that we can't draw some kind of line. I understand, yes, they don't want, full-blown pornography on YouTube or something. Makes sense. There is no incel in the world desperate enough that they're using the cover of this album as their stroking material. It just ain't happening. And it seems like we ought to be at a place in human development where we can kind of nuance out, hey, these boobs not okay. This boob is not a thing. It's not causing an issue. Kind of sad that we can't, draw a line somewhere there in the middle. It just has to be like, no boobs, none at all. Oh my God. Um, and again, it's always the kind of, ooh, sexy content that really gets people riled up. Not the violence, not the horror, not the gore, not the language, not any of the, really weird, effed up subject matter. It's always the badly drawn gray cartoon boob. Just wanted to soapbox on that for a moment because it's the first time something like that's come up, and it's really, really, yeah, weird. Fixed, no long-term consequences. I think it deserved to be pointed out. Okay, with that taken care of, I think folks have seen by now that Decibel Magazine has a book coming out with author David Gilkey. It's due for release in November about Chuck Schuldiner, sort of, the life and times of the legend behind the band Death. Should be a really fascinating read. Gilkey is a great author. He's done several books on heavy metal topics at this point. He did the Obituary book. He did the book on noise records, Damn the Machine. He did at least one other that I think I'm drawing a blank on right now. But, very good writer. He's tackled these materials. Oh, yes, the Scott Burns book. He was responsible for that one. So, very good writer, great track record. And the Death book promises to be really, really interesting. The family's, given Gelke and the magazine sort of carte blanche to cover lots of stuff. And so there's, reportedly, with the previews and stuff that Decibel's put out, a lot of personal information about Chuck that's never been divulged before that will kind of shed some light on decisions he made throughout his career. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to read. And, to coincide with that, Marty and I are hoping to do a stream on heavy metallurgy about Death. So for that, I've been revisiting the Death catalog. I don't know if we'll rank the albums or just talk about them or what. So I'm not going to dive into every album, a whole lot here, but I've been trying to organize my thoughts while revisiting these albums. The Death catalog has always been a really, really hard one for me to sort of organize and, rank in my head. It's not a super long catalog. You've got 7 albums, 8 if you include the Controlled Denied album, which I wouldn't. That's a different band and meant to be a different style. So yeah, it's just these 7 albums that we all, know. One, symbolic. Guess I've got these in reverse order. Individual thought patterns, human, spiritual healing, leprosy, and scream bloody gore. Uh, Death, of course, is famous for having changed a lot from album to album to album. And, the lineup was always different, and there were stylistic shifts that happened throughout the band's career. And this has always made them very difficult for me to grok. We think of things like, what is your favorite Death album? For a lot of people, they have a clear favorite. I don't. I've, re-listened to all of these a couple of times each for some of them. And it's just a really hard catalog to get a handle on. I think part of it is that I enjoy all the different phases of Death's discography. Some people definitely prefer the earlier material, the first, say, 3 albums or so. And some people definitely prefer the later material, like from Human onward. I'm always kind of like, why not both? They're different albums and different styles, but I tend to enjoy all of them. So yeah, it's always been weird for me, very difficult to figure out how to order these, how to rank them, what's my favorite. Um, Even my least favorite has changed a little bit over time. So this video is again not trying to do an official ranking. We'll save that and save a lot of details for hopefully getting a stream on metallurgy when we get closer to the release of the book. But it's more like a thinking out loud, trying to, talk through what I've noticed while replaying these albums over the last week or two, because this has been my playlist for the past week or two. And yeah, just trying to make sense of it. And I'm curious to see if other people have the same issue. Is the Death catalog really cut and dried for most folks? Or do other people struggle like myself when it comes to figuring out like, is this one better than that one? How do I compare these? Because there's some different difficult comparisons. So let's just do some kind of, peripheral quick thoughts on each one. Now, Scream Bloody Gore, of course, for a lot of folks, this is the first death metal album. That's debatable. There's some other contenders out there, but this one can make a strong case for that title. It's a good album. It's got a lot of tracks on it, right away. You've got some classics from the Death discography here. It really does help kind of set the template for what a lot of early death metal would contain, both sonically, lyrically, and in terms of imagery. And a lot of those themes carry through right up to the present day. I mean, you have bands now like Gruesome who are just, very deliberately trying to copy the same template that is now almost 40 years old. So, yeah, this album's always sat fine with me. I enjoy it a lot. Never really thought of it as my favorite or least favorite. So, yeah, it's somewhere in between, and I feel like it should be fairly high on the list. But a lot of these albums feel like they're going to be high on the list, so something's going to have to slide down at some point. All right. Leprosy. Leprosy is an album I've had kind of an up and down relationship with. It was, as best as I can remember, the first Death album I heard. And I didn't get into it when I first heard it. I don't even remember when I first got it, but it was definitely just during a period where, yeah, wasn't that into death metal. And so, yeah, this just didn't connect with me a lot. So didn't play it much. Don't think I even kept it very long. Over the years, there have been times I've liked the album more, and times it's kind of slid back down. Lately, and by lately I mean maybe like the past 2 to 3 years, this album has impressed me a lot more than it has at times in the past. It feels like it's maybe a more focused and tighter version of Scream Bloody Gore. They kind of took what they started with, ratcheted things up a bit, really kind of honed the edge, sharpened the blade, whatever analogy you want to use. So if you'd asked me 3 or 4 years ago, Leprosy would have been further down the stack, definitely below Scream Bloody Gore in terms of rankings. Now, I really think it has to be the other way around. I think, well, both are good and relatively similar in style. There's not a huge shift here, but I think the band just sounds better on Leprosy at this point. So, yeah, these have connected with me, and the album's pretty strong. Don't think it's going to be good enough to be my favorite, but it's higher up the ladder than it used to be. A very little nitpick to point out, these reissues that have been done through Relapse, really nice, come with good bonus material, some nice liner notes. There are times, however, where a little bit of the packaging is off. Trying to read those song titles on that background, no. To everybody who designs packaging for albums out there, your font color cannot blend in with your background color this badly. These titles are a bitch to read. So you gotta have a little more contrast between the font and whatever's going on in the background. It's a nitpick, but yeah, trying to read these things on the back of this reissue of Leprosy, it makes my eyes hurt. Moving on to number three, Spiritual Healing, the album with James Murphy, of course. This will be my least favorite Death album when we rank them. I know some people love it to death. That's fine. I like James Murphy as a guitarist, but this album has never really done it for me. It is not a bad album whatsoever, but I don't know. There's just not a lot of songs that ever stick with me very long. I just feel like I feel like in terms of performances, they're good. In terms of songwriting, it doesn't measure up to the first two albums. That is just me, in my opinion. But this one has never changed much. It's always been an album that I've been pretty lukewarm on. And again, it is not a bad album. It's just not the Death album for me. So this one, yeah, even though I've revisited it time and time again, it never really manages to, move up the ladder more. Maybe sometime in the future, it'll connect a bit better. All right, then we get to album number four, right in the middle of the discography is Human. A lot of people regard this as one of like the greatest death metal albums ever recorded. Of course, we've got an all-star killer lineup, so you really can't fault the performance as much. Um, there are, a small but vocal minority of folks that do not like this album. And they feel this is kind of the point where Death loses the plot and is focused more on being cool and mature and philosophical. And they kind of give up a lot of the core aesthetics of actual death metal. So a lot of people love it. Few people hate it. I go a little back and forth between really liking this and being like, yeah, a little more medium on it. It's very heavy sounding. It's got a crushing guitar tone to it. The production gives it a lot of weight. Yes, the performances are great. Sure, the bass is buried. We all know the deal with that. Um, at the same time, there's not as many songs on this that really I feel are super catchy in a death metal sense. You're not listening to this expecting to be like, Halloween catchy, but you play those first couple albums and there's a lot of songs that will stick with you really easily. Tracks on Death don't really do that as much, or at least not as many of them do. So yeah, I think the folks that write it off as, not very good, I think they seriously undersell the album. There's a lot of good stuff, and it still has a lot of heaviness to it. But I've never really wanted to put this up there on like, uh, S tier top three death metal albums of all time. It's never, impressed me that much. I've never had that strong a connection to it. Again, it kind of varies from being like, yeah, that's good to being like, yeah, that's very good. But is it top of the heap? For me, it's probably not. Moving on, album five, Individual Thought Patterns. Andy LaRocque on guitar for this one. This is another one that opinions tend to be split on. Some people think it is par excellence. Some people think it sounds really weak and wimpy, and they really get irritated by Chuck's, lyrics and stuff on this one. And once again, I can kind of see both camps on it. This one for me has always trended towards I like it more. Again, is it my favorite? There have been times I have ranked this as my favorite Death album. Maybe it still is, maybe it isn't. There are times I've listened to it though, and yes, like, Chuck's lyrics, which are sort of, thinly veiled swipes at people that were irritating him, do wear kind of thin. Some of the lyrics of like, I know what you're all about, and you don't fool me. It's like, I don't need to listen to you bitch about people for 40 minutes. Yeah, again, the lyrics are, well written, but the message is pretty clear and can be a little bit grating. This is an album too that while some of the production issues with like the bass are cleaned up compared to Human, this at this point, Death doesn't sound as heavy as they used to. You are sacrificing heaviness here for, maybe a stronger dose of melody. People, of course, want to say, oh, it's more and more progressive. Yes, in the sense that you've got really good musicians turning in really top-notch performances. I never think of this in terms of something like, Dream Theater progressive or Vandergraaf generator progressive or, anything like that. It's still a heavy metal album. There's still death metal elements to it. But I get that, yeah, it doesn't have the same really crushing heaviness as the old stuff. So yeah, again, a hard one for me to rank. It's been at the top of my death list in years past. I don't think it still is. It's probably down a little bit, but it's not way down here at the bottom of the stack where some people, just completely trash the album. Symbolic. What do we do with this one? Kind of notable for being one of the albums that has some folks not as well known, but still excellent musicians filling in. Symbolic's an album I sometimes forget about when thinking about the Death discography. Um, when people talk about the legend that is Death, most of the conversation revolves around the first four albums. And as album number six, this one's a little bit outside of that box, but this is a fantastic album. Production's good. The tracks are very memorable. It's really good songwriting. It feels a little, heavier, a little punchier than Individual Thought Patterns did. This is one that, you know, is again overlooked sometimes, but is a real sleeper and might be my favorite Death album at this point. It really does have a great, great track list on it. There's only one or two tracks on here that haven't stuck with me long term. So love the songwriting, love the performances, and I think it avoids some of the issues that maybe, the past two or three albums had. So maybe it's a dark horse, maybe it's not. Again, it's an excellent album. But in my mind, it's one that people probably don't think of as much. But I think I would rank it really, really high at this point. Then we have, the finale, album number seven, Sound of Perseverance. This one, for a lot of folks, ranks a much lower. I think a lot of folks would put this at the bottom of their stack. And I do get it to a point. Chuck's vocals have changed here. They've lost any real sense of like, death metal growl. They're a lot higher sounding, and if you're not in the mood for them, they will grate on you just a bit. And again, the backstory on this is pretty well known. Chuck was very much just trying to move on into the controlled denied stuff. Nuclear Blast really wanted something else that had this logo on it, so compromises had to be made. All that said, there's still a lot of very good songs on here. And again, very good performances. Several of the guys here were already in the Control Denied lineup, so it's very similar to that. I do like a lot of these songs. I think the album's probably front-loaded a bit. Uh, Maybe not as many good ones towards the end. The Painkiller covers fun. It's not bad. It's not amazing. It's fine. Um, But yeah, I'm not as down on this album as many people are. A lot of folks tend to think of this as, yeah, just almost a write-off. The one bad Death album to some people. I don't think it's the bad Death album. I think it's an all right Death album. No, I don't think it's their best. No, I don't think it's going to be in the top three. But it's not an album that I think is bad or a waste of time in any way. None of them are. Yeah, again, I said clearly my least favorite's going to have to be Spiritual Healing. Sorry, fans of Spiritual Healing, but even this one, I'd say, it at worst, it just feels like kind of an average, oh, excuse me, sort of an average, early 90s death metal album. I'm not going to condemn it in any way. So the worst album, is at least average. That means all the others are average to above average. It's a really, really strong catalog. Yeah, I know, newsflash, Death made good albums. But yeah, it's going to be tricky when the time comes to sort these out and put numbers on them. It's something that's worth remembering about rankings. They're not always carved in stone. Some things we kind of get locked in, and they rarely ever change. Nothing is ever going to change the fact that Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1 is my favorite metal album. But for something like the Death discography, yeah, it's more fluid. I may go through periods where I am a lot higher on these first two albums. These rank pretty high for me these days. But like I said in the past, Leprosy much more, much less so. There may be times where I'm more attuned to their fancier philosophical albums. Never been crazy about calling these philosophically themed. I don't know. I don't think that quite hits the nail on the head right. Yeah, but regardless, there have been years where I'm like, yeah, this is my favorite part of the discography, and these get pushed up. And what I'm just realizing lately is that, yeah, both parts of the catalog are good, and that makes it a tough one to rank. I mean, you're trying to, compare the, raw primal sounds of Scream Bloody Gore. Do I like that more or less than, the more melodic, fluid material featuring Andy LaRoque? Kind of comparing oranges and sailboats here, it feels like. This kind of thing is why a lot of people are not keen on doing rankings. It's really hard to compare these different things. I think there is some value in such rankings, though, that it does make you really sit down and think about what do I like and what do I dislike about some of these different albums? You know, what stands out to me as good and bad at this point in my life? There's no money riding on this. I'm not contractually obligated to keep the rankings the same forever. If my attitude towards them changes in a few years, that's fine. That's going to happen with lots of things as you go through life. Anyway, that's kind of just a quick perusal through the Death discography, my thoughts on it after playing it. And again, we'll see if we can get the stream put together closer to the release of that Chuck Schuldiner biography via Decibel Records. And I guess when the time comes, I'll just have to bite the pain and put some numbers on these things. But let's wrap this up and talk metal in the comments down below. And so again, is there an era of Death you definitely favor over the other? Are you all about the early albums or all about the late albums? Or are you, stuck in a quandary like me, where I think the whole damn catalog's pretty good, and that makes it really, really hard to choose a favorite? Do you have a clear favorite or a clear least favorite? I think this is one of those bands where you could ask, seven different people what their favorite Death album is, and you could get at least six different answers. And I think that's the sign of the really, really good bands, the really top bands from a genre. Yeah, when they've got enough classic albums that you can have, five, six, seven different choices for favorite, that to me says it's an elite band. When everybody's picking the same one or two albums out of a catalog, that tells me a band was maybe hot for a moment, but yeah, didn't really go the distance in terms of really high caliber releases. Death, it's not the biggest catalog, but it's one of the highest quality catalogs among heavy metal bands. And that makes it really hard to pick a favorite. That'll do it for this time. So, again, maybe more videos based around stuff I'm playing and digging into in the near future as we work our way through a very, very busy fall. But until the next video, everyone take care, and as always, keep banging your head.